The girl with the rifle, the desert heat, turned the horizon into a shimmering curtain of distortion, and Lieutenant Victor Graves watched through his long-range optic as the contractor's transport vehicle crumpled under the force of the rocket-propelled grenade he had just ordered fired. The wreckage burned black and orange against the pale sand, and Graves allowed himself a slow smile. Screams carried on the hot wind, faint and distant, like something from a bad dream someone else was having. He lowered his observation glass and straightened his back. This stretch of desert belonged to him now. Every ridge line, every wadi, every dried creek bed where shadows pooled in the afternoon. He had mapped it all, memorized it, turned it into a killing field of his own careful design. 17 coalition fighters were buried in that sand. 17 names on a list that Graves kept not out of regret, but out of professional pride. His spotter, crouched beside him in the shade of a camouflage net, began counting seconds under his breath. Both men knew what came next. A rescue element would hear the explosion, respond to the distress beacon, and come running across open ground toward the burning vehicle. They always came. That was the beautiful, predictable tragedy of soldiers. They would always run toward the sound of suffering. When the Americans arrived, Graves would add their identification tags to the collection he kept in a small tin box inside his kit bag. He had been patient for 3 months. The canyon system, the road junction, the timing of coalition patrols, he had studied it all with the methodical thoroughness that had made him one of the most respected and feared marksmen in his organization. The Americans believed this desert was their operational territory. Before sunset, Graves intended to demonstrate how deeply mistaken that belief was. He checked his watch and settled in to wait. Meanwhile, 42 kilometers away at Forward Operating Base Phantom, Master Chief Marcus Hale stood on the tarmac with his arms crossed and his jaw locked tight, watching a Black Hawk helicopter settle onto the landing pad in a storm of rotor wash and swirling red dust. 22 years. That was how long Marcus had been doing this. 22 years of pre-mission briefings and post-mission debriefs, of counting his team in and counting them back out again, of carrying the weight of other people's lives on his shoulders every single time he walked out the gate. He had deployed to places whose names most Americans would never recognize. He had buried friends in 3 different countries. He had earned every gray hair on his temples and every line on his face, and he had come to trust his instincts about people almost as completely as he trusted his own trigger finger. His instincts right now were screaming. Petty Officer Second Class Jake Devlin appeared at his elbow. Devlin was the team's primary designated marksman, a compact man made almost entirely of muscle and controlled aggression, with 15 years of precision shooting experience, and the kind of unsentimental perspective that came from having seen far too much to be surprised by anything. He stood with his arms folded, mirroring Marcus almost exactly, and he stared at the helicopter with an expression that suggested someone had just served him a plate of rocks for dinner. "That's our Overwatch asset," Devlin said flatly. It was not a question. Marcus watched the figure step off the helicopter. She was slight, maybe 5.5 feet tall on a generous day, and the flight suit she wore looked borrowed from someone who outweighed her by 40 pounds. The rotor wash caught her, and she had to lean into it to stay upright, her free hand reaching for the frame of the door for a single moment of steadying contact before she recovered. She was carrying a rifle case that was nearly as tall as she was, gripping it with both hands, moving with the deliberate care of someone fully aware that every person on the tarmac was watching her. She did not look up at any of them. She kept her head down and walked in a straight line toward the operations building. "You have got to be kidding me," Devlin said quietly, and the anger in his voice was real and unguarded. "Marcus, that is our sniper. She looks like she should be studying for final exams, not running combat operations behind enemy lines." Marcus watched her cross the tarmac. She moved without hurrying. She did not acknowledge the stares or the silence that had settled over everyone who saw her arrive. "She's what Command sent us," Marcus said. "Command has completely lost their minds." Devlin spat into the dust. "We have a hot extraction in denied territory tomorrow night. They send us a teenager with a deer rifle. What's next? Boy Scouts with slingshots? Can it, Devlin?" He said it quietly, but he understood the frustration. He had read Petty Officer Emily Carter's file 3 times, and it still did not add up. 19 years old, 6 months out of advanced marksmanship training, 0 combat deployments, 0 verified engagements, a handful of competition records, and a set of instructor evaluations that used words like extraordinary and generational talent, which Marcus had read with the deep skepticism of a man who had learned that paperwork bore only a passing resemblance to actual human performance under pressure. When the mathematics did not add up, people tended to die. That was the fundamental truth of this business. The briefing room felt tighter than usual when Marcus walked in. His team was already assembled, 6 operators who had worked together for 3 years, who moved and communicated and made decisions with the seamless efficiency of a single organism. They were good men, experienced men, men who had earned their trust in each other through fire and exhaustion and shared suffering. And now they were looking at the young woman sitting in the far corner of the room, the least visible chair available, her back against the wall, that oversized rifle case standing upright beside her knee, with the combined skepticism of people who had learned the hard way that trust was not given but earned. Emily had not introduced herself. She was not making eye contact. She sat with her hands in her lap and stared at the middle distance with an expression that was difficult to read, not frightened, Marcus thought, but focused in a way that was somehow more unsettling than fear would have been. Devlin could not help himself. "Hey, new girl, you turned the wrong corner. Army recruiting is 3 buildings east of here." A few quiet laughs ran around the room. Emily did not react, did not look up, did not change her expression by a single degree. "I said listen up." Marcus cut through the room with his command voice, and the laughter died. "We have a contractor pinned down at grid reference we're calling Objective Rattlesnake. Thomas McKinley, civilian engineer, separated from his convoy 42 kilometers northwest of this position. Last verified contact was 18 hours ago. Current intelligence places him in an abandoned agricultural compound southeast of the Tarek Road Junction. We have a 6-hour extraction window before the regional militia completes their search sweep and reaches his position." He brought up the satellite imagery on the wall display. The compound sat in a natural depression, a bowl in the terrain that an engineer would have immediately recognized as a killing ground, surrounded on 3 sides by low ridgeline and on the 4th by 3 kilometers of open scrubland. "That's a trap waiting to happen." Chief Petty Officer Raymond Walsh leaned forward and studied the image with the focused attention of a man who blew things up for a living. "You could have 100 fighters in those hills and nobody would see them until they were already inside the engagement zone. Which is why we're bringing Overwatch." Marcus paused, and he felt every eye in the room shift to Emily without anyone moving their heads. "Carter will establish a position here on this southeast ridge at a range of approximately 3,000 meters from the compound's north approach. From that elevation, she'll have sightlines on the entire movement corridor and the compound itself." Devlin let the silence stretch for exactly 2 seconds before he broke it. 3 kilometers, Marcus. That's the shot I train all year to avoid making in ideal conditions. We're going to depend on her to hold that position in desert heat with crosswinds and mirage effect, and whatever else this environment decides to throw at her tonight. Emily spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet, quiet enough that the room might have missed it if the room had not been so completely still. 3,200 meters, and it's a Remington 700 with a custom action, match-grade barrel and hand-loaded ammunition. I built it myself. The silence that followed was of a different quality entirely. Devlin turned in his chair and stared at her. "Say that again." Emily finally looked up. Her eyes were dark and steady and utterly calm, the way a still pond is calm, not because nothing is happening beneath the surface, but because the surface has been deliberately composed. The distance from that ridge to the compound's northern entrance is 3,200 meters, not 3,000, and the rifle is a Remington 700 that I've custom-built to match grade specification, not a deer rifle. You built your own precision rifle. Started when I was 14. It took 3 years before I was satisfied with it. Devlin stood up slowly, and the motion had something theatrical in it, the gesture of a man performing disbelief for an audience. "So you're telling me a 19-year-old kid who has never been outside the wire in a combat environment built her own long-range rifle in her bedroom, and now she's going to shoot over 3 kilometers in desert conditions and keep 6 experienced operators alive while she does it? Is that the story?" "If things go sideways, yes, sir." A pause. "I should mention you don't need to call me sir. I'm enlisted." Someone almost laughed. Marcus cut it off with a look. "The mission proceeds as briefed," he said firmly. Carter is our designated overwatch element, and that is the end of that discussion. Devlin, if your concerns survive contact with reality, you can file them after we bring everyone home. Right now, we plan the infiltration. Devlin sat back down. His face had gone flat and controlled, which was actually more concerning to Marcus than the outright anger had been. Flat and controlled meant Devlin was genuinely worried. The briefing continued. Routes, contingencies, communication protocols, extraction timing. Marcus walked through it all with the methodical thoroughness that had kept his team alive through 2 years of consecutive operational deployments. But he could feel the team's focus divided, one part on the mission, one part on the young woman in the corner with the oversized case. When the briefing ended and the team dispersed to their pre-mission preparations, Emily stayed in her chair. Marcus walked over. Up close, she looked even younger than she had from across the room. No makeup. Hair pulled back and secured practically. Her hands, when she set the rifle case across her knees, showed the calluses of someone who had spent thousands of hours in dry fire practice and reloading work. The skin of her trigger finger thickened and slightly asymmetric. But her face was still unlined, still soft. She had not yet been weathered by the kind of sustained stress that aged soldiers before their time. "You understand that they don't trust you," Marcus said. "Yes, sir. You understand why?" She considered the question genuinely before answering. "Because I'm 19, I have no combat record, and they're going to put their lives in my hands tomorrow night. They're not seeing me. They're seeing everyone who came before me and wasn't ready." She paused. "And they're seeing everyone they've lost." That answer surprised him. "Close enough. So here's the question, Carter. Are they right?" Emily looked up at him, and Marcus saw something in her expression that made him reassess his entire read of her. It was not bravado. It was not the brittle overconfidence of someone trying to fake their way through something they were not prepared for. It was something quieter and more settled than either of those things. The expression of a person who has already done the accounting and knows exactly where the numbers land. "No, sir," she said simply. "They're not right." "How do you know that?" "Because I don't miss." 3 words said the way you state a compass heading. No performance, no inflation, just a fact being presented. "Show me the rifle," Marcus said. She hesitated for a half-second, a small, human hesitation, the brief reluctance of someone protective of something they love, and then unlatched the case. The weapon inside was beautiful in the specific way that objects are beautiful when they have been refined down to their pure function. The base Remington action had been extensively modified. A custom-profiled barrel of obvious quality, a chassis stock precisely fitted to her dimensions, a suppressor mount, and a variable power optic that represented a significant financial investment for anyone, let alone a teenager. Every surface bore evidence of careful, deliberate labor. Every component had been chosen and fitted with the obsessive attention of someone who understood not just how things worked, but why they worked that way. "You actually built this yourself," Marcus said. It came out less like a question than a statement of quiet wonder. "My grandfather was a gunsmith. Marine Corps scout sniper, Vietnam. When I was 12, he started teaching me ballistics and wind reading and how to understand terrain. When I was 14, he started teaching me how to work on rifles. He said that if you truly understand how a weapon functions, every tolerance, every variable, you shoot it differently. You trust it more." "Your grandfather sounds like a remarkable man." "He was." Emily ran one hand along the length of the barrel, and the gesture had something almost unconscious about it, the automatic affection of long familiarity. "He passed away 2 years ago, pancreatic cancer. He made me promise before he died that I would use what he taught me. He said a skill like this is too rare and too valuable to let go to waste." She closed the case. "That's why I'm here, sir. That's what I'm honoring." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "You know what it means if you're wrong out there, if your capabilities don't match what you've claimed they are. People die," she said. "Your people, the contractor too, most likely. And you're prepared to carry that?" Emily met his eyes steadily. "I'm prepared to do my job, sir. Whether other people believe I can do it, that's their question, not mine. My job is to make sure the answer they find is yes." 20 minutes later, Marcus stood on the range behind the operations compound, and the entire team had somehow materialized to watch. Word traveled fast in small forward operating bases. Everyone wanted to see the new girl shoot. Emily set up on the firing line without hurrying. She assembled her rifle from the case with the practiced efficiency of someone for whom the process was as natural as breathing. Every component placed exactly so, every torque setting verified, every surface checked. She did not look at her audience. She did not seem particularly aware of her audience. Devlin stood with his arms crossed 3 meters to Marcus's left, his expression professionally neutral. He was watching her hands. Marcus was watching her face. "Initial target is 1,200 meters, the range officer called. Humanoid silhouette. Wind is gusting 8 to 12 miles per hour from the northwest." Emily settled into her position behind the rifle. Her breathing slowed visibly. She ran through a brief mental checklist. Marcus could almost see it, and then she was still. Completely still. Not the rigid, tense stillness of someone fighting their body into submission, but the organic, settled stillness of a person who has made peace with gravity and simply become part of the earth beneath her. It was the stillness of a hunter who has been waiting in a blind since before sunrise and has stopped counting the minutes. "Whenever you're ready," Marcus said. Emily's finger touched the trigger with the delicacy of someone reading Braille. The rifle fired. Downrange, the center of the target's chest exploded backward. "Dead center," the range officer announced, sounding slightly startled. Again, Marcus said. The bolt cycled. The rifle settled. A pause of perhaps 3 seconds. The rifle fired again, a hit slightly left of the previous one. "Wind gust moved at about 4 inches at this range," Emily said quietly, as if narrating a mathematical demonstration. "I adjusted late. I'll get the timing right." She fired a 3rd time before anyone responded. "Perfect center," the range officer said. He was definitely startled now. Marcus looked at Devlin. The marksman's arms had uncrossed. He was watching Emily with the focused, calculating attention of a professional assessing something outside his previous experience. "Move the target to 1,500 meters, Marcus ordered. The range officer looked at him. "Sir, we don't have standard markers at that distance. I'd have to estimate." "Estimate it and move the target." At 1,500 meters, the silhouette was a suggestion in the heat shimmer. Marcus could barely resolve it through binoculars. Emily adjusted her scope without apparent urgency, read the wind for 30 seconds with her eyes slightly unfocused, and fired. The target went down. "Hit," the range officer said. "Upper chest area. I'd call it an incapacitating shot at minimum." Devlin walked forward and stood over Emily. She was still prone, running the bolt, breathing slowly. "What's your verified longest confirmed hit?" Devlin asked. His voice had changed. The contempt was gone. What had replaced it was something more complicated, the reluctant respect of a craftsman recognizing superior work. Emily looked up at him. 2,100 meters, 6 months ago. I was helping a rancher in Wyoming whose livestock were being killed by coyotes. That was the confirmed distance when I ranged it afterward. "A coyote?" "Yes, sir. A coyote is not a person. A coyote doesn't know to be scared of you." "No, sir. But a bullet doesn't change its behavior based on what it's flying toward. The physics are identical. The distance, the wind correction, the drop calculation, none of that changes because the target is a person instead of an animal. The only thing that changes is the weight of pulling the trigger, and that is a psychological variable, not a mechanical one." Devlin stared at her for a long, quiet moment. Then he walked back to Marcus. "She can shoot," he said, low enough that only Marcus could hear. "I won't argue that anymore, but the range is not the field. She's never been shot at. She's never had someone trying to kill her while she's trying to work. That's a different experience entirely, and I don't know what it does to a person until I've seen it." "Neither do I," Marcus agreed. "But she's what we have, and the clock is moving. Let's get back to prep." He walked over to Emily before they left the range. Something had shifted in his assessment of her, some fundamental recalibration, and he owed her acknowledgement of that even if he could not fully articulate it yet. "Carter, walk with me for a minute." They walked away from the range toward the equipment yard, where the last light of the afternoon was turning everything copper and amber. The desert in the evening was almost beautiful, almost if you could ignore what it contained. "The men doubting you in there," Marcus said. "They're not cruel people. They're men who have lost friends in situations that felt controlled right up until they didn't. Every time they look at someone new, they're seeing all the funerals they've attended and all the names on walls back home. When they look at you and see your age and see your 0 combat record, they are not rejecting you personally. They're protecting themselves from a grief they've already felt too many times." Emily nodded slowly. "I understand that, sir." "Do you?" "Because understanding it intellectually and managing it emotionally in the field are 2 separate skills. When Devlin questions your judgment out there, and he will at least once, when Walsh ignores a call you've made because he doesn't trust your read yet, you can't let that get inside your head. Doubt is the enemy of precision. You told me yourself you don't miss. I need to know that's still true when someone is shouting at you that you're wrong." Emily was quiet for a moment. "My grandfather used to say that a sniper's most important weapon isn't the rifle. It isn't even the eye or the hand. It's the mind. The ability to slow everything down and see clearly when everyone else is reacting and panicking. He said most people spend their whole lives half blind because they're too busy and too distracted and too certain they already understand what they are looking at. A good sniper sees everything. Every detail, every pattern, every inconsistency." She paused. "I've been seeing things that other people miss since I was a small child. It used to make me feel strange and isolated. This is the first place I've been where that quality makes me useful instead of odd." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "When we're out there tonight, if you see something, anything, you call it. I don't care if Devlin thinks you're imagining things. I don't care if every person on the team disagrees with you. You call it." "Yes, sir. And Carter." He stopped walking. "I need you to speak up with confidence. Not loud, not insistent, not aggressive. Just certain. If you're certain of something, sound certain. That's how you build trust in the field." Emily looked at him with eyes that had seen considerably more than 19 years of ordinary life. "I won't let you down, Sergeant Hale." He wanted to believe her. He was not sure he did, but in 3 hours they would find out one way or another. The Black Hawk crossed the desert at altitude, all lights extinguished, the crew communicating in clipped professional shorthand while Marcus's team sat in the cargo bay with their weapons across their laps and their thoughts kept carefully to themselves. Pre-mission ritual. Every operator had their own version, the internal settling, the final mental review of routes and contingencies and communications protocols, the quiet reckoning with mortality that never quite became comfortable no matter how many times you went through it. Emily sat at the far end of the bay, the rifle case between her feet, her eyes fixed on some middle point in the air in front of her. She was not running through checklist items, Marcus thought. She was doing something more specific, building the terrain in her mind, visualizing the ridge, the compound, the distances, the angles, constructing a three-dimensional model of the battlefield before she arrived at it. Devlin leaned over and put his mouth near Marcus's ear. "You actually trust her to cover us?" "I trust every person on this team to do their job." "That is not a direct answer to the question I asked. It's the only answer that's operationally useful right now." Devlin leaned back and said nothing more. Through the green cast of the interior lighting, Marcus could see Walsh watching Emily with an expression that had moved from skepticism to something more complicated. The careful, provisional assessment of a man who has seen enough to know that first impressions occasionally turn out to be wrong. 2 minutes, the crew chief called. The team stood as one, checking each other's gear with the automatic efficiency of long practice. Emily struggled briefly with her pack, and Marcus saw Walsh step over without comment and adjust the shoulder straps to a better position. A small gesture, barely anything, but it meant something. The ramp opened. Desert air rushed in hot, dry, carrying sand and the faint mineral smell of baked earth. Below, the landing zone was a flat stretch of nothing surrounded by more nothing, dark under a half-moon. 30 seconds, green light. Go. They hit the earth and immediately dispersed, the team flowing into their formation with the practiced ease of long repetition. The Black Hawk was gone almost before the dust settled, its sound fading rapidly into the vast indifference of the desert night. Marcus took a knee and scanned the darkness through his night optic. Nothing moved. The desert was empty and enormous and entirely hostile. "Carter, Walsh, you're moving to overwatch. Radio check every 30 minutes. First sign of anything, you call it immediately." "Roger," Walsh said. Emily simply nodded, already moving. Marcus watched them disappear into the darkness, two shapes swallowed quickly by shadow and distance. Then they were gone, and he was left with his team and the long approach to Objective Rattlesnake. "Standard patrol formation," he said quietly. "Weapons hot. Let's move." 30 minutes into the approach, Emily's voice came over the radio. She was whispering, barely audible but perfectly controlled. "Overwatch is in position. I have clear sight lines on the compound. No visible movement from any exterior positions. Copy. Maintain watch. Report any changes." They continued through the terrain, working along the floor of a narrow drainage channel that offered concealment at the cost of limited visibility. Marcus did not like it. Too many corners, too many potential choke points. Every time the channel bent, he felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise and then settle again. At the 40-minute mark, Emily's voice returned, slightly more tense. "Actual, I'm observing something anomalous. Request you hold current position." Devlin, moving behind Marcus, muttered something under his breath. Marcus held up a closed fist and the team froze. Overwatch, define anomalous. Wind patterns? A brief pause as if she was choosing her words carefully. I've been watching sand movement for the past 22 minutes. There's a section approximately 400 meters northwest of the compound where the movement pattern is inconsistent with the natural airflow. The sand is behaving as though there's an obstacle disrupting surface wind, but I can't see the obstacle. The disruption pattern is too geometrically regular to be a natural rock feature. I believe something is buried there. Devlin keyed his radio. She's halting our approach because the sand is moving in a way she doesn't like. Marcus, with respect, we have a contractor running out of time and a 6-hour window. We cannot stop for this. Marcus pulled up the satellite imagery on his tablet. He zoomed to the coordinates Emily had indicated. He saw nothing, empty desert. Overwatch, I'm looking at 48-hour-old satellite imagery of that position and seeing nothing. Yes, sir. If it was properly buried and covered, satellite wouldn't catch it. But the displacement pattern in the sand surface above it is visible at my angle and elevation. I am confident something artificial is at that location. Devlin was already on the radio. Sergeant Hale, we are burning time we don't have over a feeling about wind-blown sand. Marcus stood at the precise decision point he had known was coming. Trust the experienced operators who considered this paranoia, or trust the untested 19-year-old who claimed to read stories in terrain features that did not show up on satellite. One choice kept them on schedule. The other might add 20 minutes to their approach. One choice might also get them all killed. He thought about her eyes, the way she had said, "I don't miss." The way that stillness on the range had been real and not performed. Overwatch confidence level on this assessment. No hesitation. 100%, sir, something is there. Team, we're adjusting the approach route. Wide arc around the indicated position. Carter, I need your eyes on that location. Anything moves, you call it the instant it moves. Devlin's response over the radio was tight with controlled frustration but wordless. He was a professional. He would follow orders and file complaints later. They circled wide, adding close to 25 minutes to their approach. Marcus felt the team's resistance as a physical thing, not insubordination, but the focused irritation of skilled people being asked to trust something they did not yet believe in. He felt it himself, the nagging worry that he was making a mistake. They were halfway through the arc when Emily's voice came back, and something in its quality had shifted. Actual. I have movement at the indicated position. 3 individuals emerging from a concealed fighting position. I'm reading an RPG system and at least 2 support weapons. Marcus felt the cold certainty of it land in his chest. If they had stayed on the original route, they would have walked past that position at point-blank range. They would have been caught in the open with a rocket-propelled grenade team directly off their flank. Can you engage from your position? Negative. They are in a topographic depression from my angle. I don't have a shot. Copy. Team, confirmed hostile element at the indicated position. RPG team, 3 personnel. They do not have eyes on us yet. We use that. He paused, running through the geometry. We're going to work around their flank. For the next 20 minutes, Marcus maneuvered his team through open desert with the painstaking care of a surgeon. When they were finally in position, they were within 100 meters of the RPG team, who were still watching the kill zone they had prepared, entirely unaware that the people they were waiting to kill had arrived from completely the wrong direction. On my mark, 3, 2, 1, mark. 3 rifles fired in a coordinated burst. 3 bodies dropped without a sound. They moved forward and cleared the position, and what they found made Marcus's blood run cold. This was not just an RPG team. It was the anchor point of a carefully designed ambush network, interconnected fighting positions, pre-registered fire lanes, cached ammunition, fields of fire that crossed and overlapped to cover every logical approach route to the compound. Walking into this trap would have been a slaughter. There was no other word for it. Overwatch. Marcus's voice was quieter than he intended. You just kept all of us alive. How did you see that? The wind, sir, Emily said. Exactly like I told you. It doesn't lie. From 3 kilometers away in darkness through a precision optic, watching granules of displaced sand. Devlin was standing over one of the fallen fighters, his face pale in the green cast of his night optic. He keyed his radio slowly. Carter. He stopped, started again. Carter, this is Devlin. I owe you an apology. What you just did, that was real. That was exceptional work. Thank you, sir. A pause. Keep moving. There may be more. There were more. Over the next hour, Emily systematically called out 7 additional ambush positions scattered around the compound's approaches. Each one, when verified, revealed prepared fighting positions with weapons and ammunition, placed to funnel any rescue element into overlapping fields of fire with no cover. Someone had spent considerable time building this. Someone with professional military training and detailed knowledge of coalition doctrine. Overwatch, we need to clear these positions before we can advance. Can you engage from your location? Most of them, yes. Range is between 1,200 and 1,500 meters for the majority. The far ridge position is approximately 3,200 meters from me. A brief pause. I can make those shots. Devlin's response was immediate. Carter, 1,200 to 1,500 is viable even though it's difficult, but the far ridge position at 3,200 meters in darkness in desert conditions engaging specific personnel targets, that is outside the realm of established possibility. Understood, sir. Request permission to attempt it anyway. Devlin looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the far ridge. He looked at his watch. He looked at the sky where the ambient light conditions were what they were, not what he would have chosen. You have authorization to engage each identified position in sequence. Work nearest to farthest. Call each shot before you fire. Walsh confirms each result. Roger that. A pause. First position, range 1,280 meters. Wind 8 miles per hour from the south-southwest, gusting to 12. Engaging. The shot reached them as a distant, quiet crack, softer than expected at this range, absorbed by the vastness of the desert. Walsh, watching through his scope, said down in a flat voice. Second position, Emily said, already recalculating. Range 1,340 meters, same wind, engaging. Crack. Down. She worked through the positions with the methodical pace of someone clearing a checklist. Each shot called out in advance, each result confirmed by Walsh, each confirmation received with nothing more than the next set of coordinates. No celebration, no acknowledgement, no wasted breath, just the quiet execution of extraordinary work. Walsh was watching through his scope with an expression that Marcus had never seen on his face before. When Walsh, who had seen everything twice, looked like he was witnessing something impossible that was worth noting. Marcus, Walsh said quietly between Emily's 7th and 8th shots. She hasn't missed, not once, not a single miss. I have been doing this for 14 years, and I am telling you that what I am watching is unlike anything I have seen. Keep watching, Marcus said. Count the confirmations. The far ridge position was the final one, 3,200 meters. Nearly 2 miles in darkness with heat shimmer and a crosswind that had been shifting between 6 and 15 miles per hour all evening. Actual, I need 60 seconds to read the conditions. Hold position. Marcus counted. The desert was utterly still. Somewhere in the black nothing, 3 kilometers away, Emily Carter was lying behind a rifle she had built herself in a workshop in Wyoming, and she was doing math that most people believed was physically impossible. 60 seconds felt like a long time. Then the rifle cracked, faint as a stone dropped into a distant pool. Silence. Target down, Emily said. The approach to the compound's north entrance is clear. You have a direct route. Marcus let out a breath he realized he had been holding for the better part of a minute. Copy that, Overwatch. Maintain your position and cover the extraction. We're going in. The contractor was exactly where the intelligence had placed him, a small, terrified man curled in a corner of the compound's rear storage room, dehydrated and barely coherent, but alive. The extraction took 4 minutes. By the time the eastern sky began to show the first gray intimations of dawn, Marcus's team was back at the extraction point, weapons outward, waiting for the sound of rotors. Emily came in from the ridge as the helicopter was making its approach. She walked with the measured, slightly stiff gait of someone who had been holding one position for an extended period. Her face was streaked with dust and her eyes were red from hours behind a scope, but her expression was the same composed, settled stillness it had been from the beginning. She took a position at the perimeter and said nothing. She did not look for congratulation or acknowledgement. She simply did her job until the job was done. Marcus walked over to her. 11 confirmed kills, he said, at ranges between 1,200 and 3,200 meters. One of those at a range that most people in this business would call impossible. And you identified the entire ambush network from a single observation point at 3 kilometers. Emily shrugged slightly. Math and patience, sir. That's what my grandfather taught me. Walsh was loading equipment onto the arriving helicopter. He paused long enough to look at Emily with an expression that Marcus had previously only seen Walsh wear when discussing operators he considered truly exceptional. He did not say anything. He did not need to. Devlin was the one who crossed the distance and stood in front of her. In the gray pre-dawn light, his expression was open in a way it almost never was. "Carter, I was wrong about you. I owe you that acknowledgement clearly and without qualification. I have been shooting for 15 years. I have attended every advanced course the Navy offers. What you did tonight was the finest long-range marksmanship I have ever personally witnessed. And the wind reading, the way you identified that ambush position before we could see it, I don't have a category for that. I want to learn how you do it." Emily looked at him for a moment. "My grandfather said that most people think sniping is about the mechanics of the shot. But it's really about reading the environment, understanding that everything around you is communicating constantly. Wind, terrain, light, shadow, sand movement, all of it tells you something if you know how to listen." She paused. "I'll teach you what I can." Devlin nodded slowly. "I'd appreciate that." The helicopter touched down and they loaded up. Marcus sat back and watched the desert recede below them as the aircraft climbed, and he turned over in his mind everything he had witnessed in the past several hours. He had come into this operation with serious doubts about the young woman sitting at the far end of his helicopter with her rifle case on her lap. Those doubts had been comprehensively answered. The question now was what happened next. He already suspected that the answer to that question was going to be complicated. Hunter becomes the hunted. The debriefing room felt smaller than it should have for what it contained. Colonel Sarah Hendricks set her tablet on the table and looked at each person in the room in sequence. And there was something in her expression that Marcus had learned to recognize over years of working with her. The particular focus of someone who has just received information that changes the shape of a problem. Someone walked me through how a routine contract recovery turned into 11 confirmed enemy fatalities, and the complete dismantling of what our intelligence people are now calling the most sophisticated ambush network they've encountered in this theater. Marcus leaned forward. "We walked into a prepared killing field, ma'am. Professional work extensively planned, designed to eliminate any coalition element that attempted to reach the contractor. We identified and cleared it before it could be used. Your after-action report says Petty Officer Carter identified the ambush positions through analysis of wind displacement patterns. Is that accurate?" "It is." Hendricks turned to Emily. "Stand up, Carter." Emily stood, hands behind her back, face neutral. "You're 19 years old. You have 6 months of service following advanced training. You have no prior combat deployments. Last night you achieved 11 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,200 meters, including one engagement at 3,200 meters, and you identified a sophisticated ambush network through environmental observation that our satellite assets missed entirely." Hendricks paused. "I've read your training evaluations. Nothing in them adequately explains this level of performance, so I need you to explain it to me. Specifically." Emily glanced briefly at Marcus. He gave her a small nod. "Desert terrain in this region has predictable airflow patterns based on temperature differential, elevation, and time of day," Emily said. "When those patterns are disrupted, it indicates an obstacle that is not naturally occurring. I observed specific disruptions in surface sand movement around the compound that were geometrically inconsistent with the natural terrain. The pattern suggested buried structures, either vehicles or constructed fighting positions. I reported it. And the long-range engagement? Once Sergeant Hale confirmed the positions were hostile, engaging them from distance was the tactically sound choice. It minimized risk to the team, preserved operational security, and allowed the hostile network to be dismantled systematically before it could be activated. You make it sound uncomplicated. The principle is straightforward, ma'am. The execution requires practice." Devlin spoke up. "Ma'am, with your permission, I've been a designated marksman for 15 years. I've attended every advanced shooting program the Navy offers. I was skeptical of Petty Officer Carter before this mission, and I was wrong to be. What she did last night was technically beyond the performance envelope that most experienced professionals would claim is achievable. The 3,200-meter engagement in those conditions, at that hour, with variable wind, I would not have attempted it. I don't think I could have made it." He paused. "She made it look unremarkable. That is an accurate characterization, not an exaggeration." Hendricks let that statement sit for a moment, then picked up her tablet. Intelligence has spent the night analyzing the ambush network Carter identified and destroyed. Their conclusion is that it was constructed and commanded by a former Russian Special Forces operator named Victor Graves. He has been active in this region for approximately 8 months, specifically targeting coalition personnel and assets. Before last night, he had 17 confirmed kills. He was considered essentially untouchable because of his extreme operational care and professionalism. Marcus felt the cold certainty of it settle before Hendricks finished. Before last night, Devlin said slowly, meaning last night changed something. Last night, Carter eliminated 8 of his personnel and dismantled an operation he had invested months in constructing. Intelligence believes he was in the area personally coordinating the ambush, which means he now knows that a coalition sniper disrupted his operation at extreme range in darkness with perfect accuracy. Hendricks set the tablet down. Men like Graves do not accept that kind of outcome without response. He will seek to understand what was used against him. When he determines that the responsible operator was a 19-year-old woman with a modified rifle, he will take that personally. So she's a target now, Walsh said. She's a high-value target, and we have a choice about what to do with that. Marcus was already reading what was coming. No. Sergeant Hale, no, ma'am. Whatever you're about to suggest, the answer is no. We have an enemy operator who has killed 17 of our people. We now have something he wants. His ego and his professional reputation make him vulnerable in a way he has never been before. We could use that. You want to use her as bait, Devlin said. His voice was flat. Stake her out and wait for him to come. I want to eliminate a threat that has been killing coalition personnel for 8 months. The method involves calculated risk with appropriate support. The room was completely silent. Emily was looking at Colonel Hendricks with an expression that Marcus could not immediately read. Not fear, not outrage, something more measuring and cold. What exactly are you proposing, ma'am? Emily asked. Hendricks outlined it. A fabricated intelligence leak through compromised communication channels. Information that a high-value coalition sniper would be providing overwatch for a specific operation from a specific position at a specific time. Graves, motivated by professional pride and the need to reassert his reputation, would come to investigate or eliminate. When he arrived, a prepared counter-sniper element would take him. If your counter-sniper teams miss, Walsh said quietly, Carter is in a fighting position alone against one of the most capable operators in the region. Then she shouldn't miss either, Carmichael said from the back of the room, and the particular cold pragmatism of the intelligence service was evident in every word. I'll do it, Emily said. The room turned to look at her. Carter, Marcus began. I'll do it, sir. Quiet but settled. If Graves has killed 17 of our people and I have an opportunity to help stop him, that's what I'm here for. That's the job. She paused. I'm not going to pretend I'm not concerned, but concern isn't a reason to decline. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Those eyes again, old eyes, eyes that had done the math on the situation and arrived at a conclusion before anyone else in the room had finished the problem. If this goes wrong, if it goes wrong, sir, then it goes wrong and I deal with it. I'd rather try something difficult than guarantee something terrible. She looked at Hendricks. What do you need from me? The next 72 hours had the quality of time experienced differently in different parts of the same world. On the base, things moved with apparent calm, preparations, briefings, routine operations. In the operations center, things moved with the controlled urgency of people who understood exactly how little margin for error they had. Emily spent most of those hours on the range, but Marcus noticed she was not shooting at distance. She was practicing quick target acquisition, rapid snap shooting at close and medium ranges, building the kind of instinctive speed that you needed when someone was actively hunting you, and the time for careful calculation had run out. Devlin worked with her. The transformation in their relationship over the past 3 days had been remarkable, from the contempt of a professional dismissing an amateur to the focused investment of a master sharing craft with a student who might eventually exceed the teacher. He showed her techniques for reading changing light conditions, for calculating wind velocity at speed, for making the half-second decisions that determined whether you went home. She absorbed it the way Marcus had noticed she absorbed everything, completely, without apparent effort, integrated immediately into her existing framework of knowledge. She's frightening, Devlin told Marcus one afternoon, watching Emily work through a rapid engagement drill at 200 meters. Not in a threatening way, In the way that you feel when you encounter something that redefines your sense of what's possible. I show her something once, and it's hers. I've never taught anyone who learns that fast. Is she ready for this? Marcus asked. Is anyone ready to be hunted by Victor Graves? Devlin watched Emily cycle through targets with fluid, unhurried speed. She's as ready as a person can be made in 72 hours. Whether that's enough, I genuinely don't know. The night before the operation, Marcus found her in the armory at midnight, cleaning a rifle that was already clean. You should be sleeping, he said. I'm not tired. She ran the cleaning rod through the barrel with the automatic motion of someone whose hands needed to be doing something. Or I'm too tired to sleep, one of those. Marcus pulled a stool close and sat. Being scared is allowed, Carter. I know it is. I'm not sure you do. The way you present yourself, you project a kind of absolute composure that makes it hard to tell when you're struggling. Emily set the cleaning rod down and looked at him. My grandfather used to say that fear is just information. It tells you that something matters. The question is what you do with the information. You can let it freeze you, that's what most people do, or you can use it as fuel. Fear means the situation is real and the stakes are genuine. A sniper who isn't afraid before a mission isn't paying proper attention. And a sniper who is afraid has good reason to be precise. Marcus nodded slowly. You're going to do this the right way. Whatever happens tomorrow, you're not going in alone. The counter-sniper teams will have sight lines on Graves' most likely positions. Devlin will be with you. We'll have communication throughout. If anything feels wrong, I know, sir. She fitted the bolt back into the action and worked it smooth. I'll call it. Your grandfather's story, the one about the tree line in Vietnam. You think about that? Emily was quiet for a moment. He was the only person who stopped. The only one who trusted what he was seeing over everyone else's skepticism. And because he held that position, because he refused to move forward until he had verified what his instincts were telling him, his entire team came home. She looked at the rifle. He taught me that the most dangerous thing a sniper can do is doubt what their eyes are telling them. Not because snipers are infallible, we're not. But because in the moment when you're most pressured to second-guess yourself, that second-guessing is itself the greatest risk. And tomorrow I trust my eyes and I do my job. She closed the action. Whatever Graves brings, I'll deal with it. Marcus studied her for a long moment. Get some rest, even a few hours. Yes, sir. He got up to leave. She stopped him. Sir, when you decided to trust me during the first mission, when I called out the wind anomaly and the whole team thought I was wrong, what made you hold the approach? Marcus thought about it honestly. Two things, the certainty in your voice, and something I can't fully explain, the impression that you were stating a fact rather than making a guess. I've been doing this long enough that I've developed a certain sensitivity to the difference between the two. He paused. I'm glad I listened. So am I. She looked back at her rifle. Good night, sir. The operation launched before dawn. Marcus positioned his team on a patrol route designed to look exactly like what it was supposed to look like, routine reconnaissance through a corridor where coalition forces operated regularly. Emily and Devlin moved separately to the ridge that had been specified in the intelligence leak. The position that Graves would believe placed the coalition's high-value sniper in an exposed and vulnerable location. The counter-sniper teams were invisible, positioned hours before first light, buried in hides that covered the approaches to Emily's position from the most likely angles. They were experienced marksmen with good equipment and clear fields of fire. Marcus ran his patrol route and listened to the radio. For the first hour, nothing happened. The second hour brought the same. Marcus began to wonder if Graves was smarter than they had given him credit for, if the intelligence leak had seemed too convenient, if the setup had been transparent enough that an experienced operator would recognize and avoid it. Then Emily's voice came over the radio, and it had a specific quality to it that Marcus had come to recognize, not alarm, not panic, but the focused intensity of a person who has seen something and is processing it at speed. All units, I have movement, 1,200 meters northeast of my position. Single individual moving deliberately using terrain. He's good, staying in shadow, working along the ground contour. Counter-sniper Team 1, negative visual, I'm looking at that sector and I don't have anything. Team 2 and 3 reported the same. Marcus keyed his radio. Carter, confirm you have eyes on a specific individual at those coordinates. Confirmed. He's using the dead ground extremely well, but from my elevation I have just enough angle to follow him. He's moving toward a position that would give him a direct sight line to my location. He's setting up. Over the next several minutes, Emily talked the counter-sniper teams onto the target with quiet, methodical precision, describing not just where the individual was, but where he was going, what route he was taking, predicting his next position before he reached it. It was the same quality of forward-thinking pattern recognition that had identified the ambush network 3 nights earlier, applied to the movement of a single experienced operator across complex terrain. Team 1 finally confirmed contact. "I have him. Single individual moving tactical. He's entering a hide position. I have a shot. Request authorization to engage." Marcus was formulating the authorization when Emily's voice cut through. "Hold. Do not shoot. Silence. Carter, explain. The position he's chosen is good, but it's not the best available position. The ground 40 meters south of where he's setting up gives a better firing angle and better cover from 2 of the 3 counter-sniper teams. If Graves chose where he chose, either he doesn't know about the better position or he chose the inferior position deliberately. A Spetsnaz sniper with 8 months in this theater knows this ground. He knows the better position exists." She paused. "He chose the visible position intentionally. Hendricks came on the command frequency. Overwatch, we have facial recognition confirmation. That individual is Graves. Counter-sniper teams have a clean shot. I'm authorizing engagement." "Ma'am, with great respect, I believe he is the distraction. There is a second shooter somewhere in this environment. I need 2 minutes to find them." "You have 60 seconds, Carter." Devlin beside Emily was scanning. Marcus was scanning. The counter-sniper teams were scanning. Everyone was looking for a second shooter and finding nothing. "There," Emily said. "Northeast, approximately 1,500 meters from my position." There was a scope glint for approximately 1 second against the ridge line. "It's gone now, but I saw it." Counter-sniper teams reorient to the northeast ridge at 1,500 meters from Overwatch's position and confirm or deny. The teams worked. Long seconds passed. Team 1, "I can't get an angle on the northeast ridge from my position. Trees are blocking." Team 2, "Same problem." Team 3, "Partial view only. I'm not seeing anything, but my sight picture is incomplete." Marcus pulled up the mapping. Emily was right. The geometry of it was precise. Whoever had chosen the second shooter's position had done so with full knowledge of where the counter-sniper teams were likely to be placed. The northeast ridge had been selected specifically because it was masked from all 3 natural Overwatch positions. The only sight line that reached it was Emily's, from her elevated ridge position. "Overwatch, what's your range to the second position?" "Approximately 2,100 meters. Variable wind, gusting 8 to 15. I can make the shot." 2,100 meters with gusting wind and a target you saw for 1 second, Devlin said quietly, not over the radio but directly to her. "I know where he is," Emily said. "I know the position, I don't need to see him continuously." Devlin looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded and picked up his spotting scope. "I'll call the wind." Marcus made the decision. "Overwatch, you are authorized to engage the secondary target. Team 1, the moment Carter fires, you engage Graves. Do not give him time to relocate or react." "Roger that." Over the open radio channel, Marcus could hear Devlin and Emily working together. Wind speed, direction, mirage, air density, drop calculation for that distance. It was a precisely coordinated technical exercise being conducted under conditions that would have destroyed the focus of most shooters. Emily's voice, when she spoke finally, was barely above a whisper. "Wind is dropping. It'll steady in approximately 4 seconds, firing on the steady." 4 seconds of silence. The rifle fired, Marcus counted. 1, 2, 3. Target down, Emily reported, steady as a compass needle. Secondary shooter is eliminated. Simultaneously from Team 1, engaging primary target. A fraction of a second. Graves is down, confirmed hit. He's down. The desert was quiet. Marcus stood in the stillness of it and breathed. "All units maintain positions. I want physical confirmation on both before we celebrate anything." The confirmations came in over the next 20 minutes. Walsh's element reached Graves' position and verified. A second element reached the northeast ridge. Primary target confirmed. Single shot from Team 1, center mass. It's Graves, no question. A pause. Secondary target also confirmed. Single penetrating wound, upper chest area. Based on equipment and kit, also Spetsnaz. Running identification now. Another pause. "Ma'am, whoever this was, they were not casual. This is professional equipment, military grade. Graves brought a partner." Marcus closed his eyes for a single second. If they had engaged Graves when the counter-sniper teams had the shot, the second shooter would have been free to eliminate Emily without opposition. The operation would have ended in an entirely different way. "Overwatch," Marcus said. "That was exceptional work. You just prevented this operation from going badly wrong in a way that would have been irreversible." "Thank you, sir." A pause, requesting permission to move to a secondary position. If Graves brought 2 shooters, there may be more in the area. Marcus smiled despite himself. Of course, she was already thinking about the next thing. "Granted, stay sharp." The flight back was different from every previous flight Marcus could remember. Not the loose, expansive relief of a team that had survived something they had expected might kill them. Something quieter, more reflective. Devlin sat across from Emily and stared at the floor for a while before he spoke. 2,100 meters, variable wind, a target you saw for 1 second against a ridgeline. He shook his head slowly. "How do you do that? Not how do you make the shot, I understand the mechanics well enough by now. How do you hold the position you saw in your memory precisely enough to put a round through it based on a 1-second observation?" Emily looked at her hands. "I don't experience it the way you might think. When I see something, it doesn't fade the way most visual information does. It stays, with full detail. The exact angle of the light, the precise distance, the orientation of the position. I close my eyes and it's still there." She paused. "I've been like this my entire life. My grandfather was the first person who understood what I was describing and knew how to turn it into something useful." "Eidetic memory," Devlin said quietly. "Something like that, or close enough. My grandfather said the word didn't matter, only what you did with it." Marcus listened to this exchange and thought about the young woman sitting across from him, 19 years old, carrying something extraordinary and something genuinely difficult in equal measure, trying to honor a dead man's hopes and a dead man's teachings in a world that kept finding new ways to demand the impossible of her. He was glad she was on his team. He was also, quietly and without saying it, concerned about what this work was going to cost her over time. The weight of gifts, the official debrief, was intense and long. Carmichael wanted every detail of how Emily had identified the second shooter. Hendricks wanted a full technical reconstruction of both engagements. The intelligence community wanted a comprehensive understanding of Graves' tactical methodology. Emily answered every question with patience and precision, but Marcus could see the tiredness accumulating in her eyes as the hours passed. When the room finally cleared, Hendricks asked Emily and Marcus to stay. "Carter," Hendricks said, "in 25 years I have worked with special operations snipers at every level of this organization. I have not seen this. I need you to understand that clearly. What you did in this operation, the identification of the threat, the engagement of a target at extreme range based on a brief partial observation, the prevention of what would have been a catastrophic outcome, this is not normal performance. This is not even exceptional performance. This is something that I don't have accurate language for." Emily was quiet. "I'm recommending commendation, and I'm recommending permanent assignment to Sergeant Hale's team." Hendricks paused. "I'm also issuing a caution. What you can do is not going to stay unknown. People are already talking. The intelligence community will want you for specialized programs. Senior command will want to leverage your capabilities in operations beyond the scope of this team. The pressure that is about to come in your direction is going to be significant. I want you to be prepared for it." After Hendricks dismissed them, Marcus walked Emily across the compound toward the barracks. The sun was going down again, the desert doing its evening performance in shades of burnt copper and deep violet. "You understand what she's saying," Marcus said, "about the pressure that's coming?" "Yes, sir." "How do you feel about it?" Emily considered the question. "I feel like I'm 19 years old, and I've been asked to carry things that most people don't encounter in entire careers. And I feel like I'm going to keep being asked to carry more." She looked at the horizon. "My grandfather made me a promise sound simple. Use the gift, don't waste it. Help people, be of service." It sounded simple when he said it. She paused. "It is not simple." "No," Marcus agreed, "it isn't. But I don't want to walk away from it, even when it's hard, even when the weight is enormous. Because the alternative is a world where people die who didn't have to die, and I had the ability to prevent it and chose not to." She looked at him. "How do you live with that alternative?" "I don't think you do," Marcus said quietly. "I think that's the thing that keeps people like you in this work even when every sensible instinct says walk away." 3 days after the Graves operation, Marcus found Emily on the range before dawn, which had become her established morning routine. She was running methodical drills, not the long-range work she was known for, but careful, precise repetition of fundamentals. Every shot deliberate, followed by extended analysis of the result. "You can't sleep?" Marcus asked, settling in beside her on the firing line. "I sleep enough." She ejected a casing and set it aside. "I sleep better when I've been on the range first. It settles something." "What are you working on?" "Identifying inconsistencies. Every shot tells you something about what you did right and what you can improve. I'm cataloging." She paused. "My grandfather used to say that a sniper who stops learning has already started dying. There's always something to refine." Marcus watched her shoot for a few minutes. The consistency was remarkable, the same motion, the same stillness, the same result, repeated with only microscopic variation across dozens of rounds. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said. "Of course, sir. What do you want? Not from this job, not from the team, from your life. What does Emily Carter actually want?" Emily stopped shooting. She lowered the rifle and looked at the target downrange as if she had not considered the question in some time. Maybe had not allowed herself to consider it. "I want to be worth what my grandfather saw in me," she said finally. "He was the only person who truly understood what I was. My family loved me, but they didn't know what to do with me. The way I see things, the way I retain information, the way I need to understand how everything works. I was strange and difficult and isolating to be around sometimes. My grandfather wasn't any of those things with me. He took what I was and showed me that it had a purpose." She paused. "I want to be worthy of that. I want to be what he believed I could become. And if those are two different things, what he believed you could become and what you actually want for yourself." Emily looked at him. "I don't think they are." Marcus nodded slowly. He was not entirely convinced, but he did not push. "Just make sure," he said. "As you get older, as the work gets heavier, make sure you're still choosing this because it's what you want, not only because it's what you promised." The call came at 0400 hours with that particular insistence that distinguished emergency summons from routine urgency. Marcus was in operations within 15 minutes. His team followed him in ones and twos, wearing the expressions of people who had been dragged through the transition from sleep to full alertness and were not entirely happy about it. Hendricks was there. Carmichael was there. A man Marcus did not recognize, a CIA officer, he gathered from the context, stood at the front of the room looking like someone who had been awake for 36 hours and expected to be awake for 36 more. 12 hours ago, the CIA officer said without preamble, "One of our protected assets sent a distress signal. Dr. Sarah Chen, civilian research scientist operating under deep cover in the town of Al-Rashid, approximately 60 kilometers from here. Her last communication indicated she had been compromised. The extraction team we dispatched was ambushed 15 kilometers outside the town. 4 killed, 2 wounded. The survivors were forced to abort." Walsh looked at the map that had been put up. Al-Rashid sat in a topographic bowl surrounded by flat desert approaches. "How many hostile personnel in the town?" "Current estimate is approximately 200. A brief silence absorbed that number. "Doctor, Chen's work is classified above the level of clearance in this room." The CIA officer continued, "But I can tell you that if she is captured and what she knows is extracted, the consequences for ongoing coalition intelligence operations would be severe. We have a window of approximately 24 hours before the militia relocates her to a facility we cannot easily reach." Devlin crossed his arms. 200 fighters, 1 hostage. No current intelligence on her precise location. No support element on site. This is not a rescue operation. This is a theoretical rescue operation. She's in an abandoned textile manufacturing facility on the eastern edge of the town, the CIA officer said. "Satellite placed her there 4 hours ago. She has minimal supplies and no weapons." Emily had been studying the map from the moment it appeared. She looked up. The terrain around the town, the open desert approaches on all sides. That means there are elevated positions around the perimeter with unobstructed sight lines into the town itself. Carmichael looked at her. "Who is this?" "Petty Officer Carter," Hendricks said. "She's the reason Victor Graves is no longer your problem. Continue, Carter." Emily moved to the map. "If I establish an overwatch position on the high ground east of the town, I can cover the team's movement through the outer districts. Any patrol that comes within range, I suppress before they can identify and engage the team. The confusion of taking precision fire from an unexpected direction will cause the militia to react defensively, reorganize, recheck their perimeter, account for personnel. That gives the extraction element windows of movement that wouldn't otherwise exist. At what range? Carmichael asked. Depending on the positioning, somewhere between 1,400 and 1,800 meters for most potential targets. There's a position on the eastern ridge that should work well. With 200 fighters in and around the town, 200 fighters distributed across a town, and its approaches are not a monolithic force. They are a collection of small elements with individual sight lines and individual awareness. Systematic disruption at precision range can create the impression of a much larger threat than actually exists. It buys time and movement. Carmichael looked at Hendricks. Is she serious? She is. And you think this is viable? Based on her recent performance, I think it's the best available option. Carmichael studied Emily for a moment with the evaluating gaze of someone who has spent a career assessing assets and liabilities. Fine, but I want to be absolutely clear about what we're working with here. Dr. Chen is one of the most valuable human intelligence assets in this region. If this goes wrong, if we lose the team or lose Chen, the consequences extend well beyond this operation. Then let's make sure it doesn't go wrong, Marcus said. He looked at his team. This is voluntary. Anyone who wants to pass, this is the moment. No judgment, no record. Walsh stood up. In. Rodriguez, in. Chen, the team medic, cracked his knuckles. Somebody has to keep you from bleeding out in an alley somewhere. In. Devlin looked at Emily, then at Marcus. If she's going out there, someone needs to be beside her. In. Marcus looked at the map. Then let's plan this properly. The insertion was clean. The flight was quiet, everyone internally occupied with their own preparation. Emily spent the approach studying the aerial imagery of Al-Rashid that Carmichael's people had provided, committing the street layout to memory with that comprehensive retention that Marcus had come to recognize as one of her genuine advantages. When they set down 8 kilometers out, the team moved fast through the desert in the last light, using the dusk for cover. Emily and Devlin split off to the eastern ridge as planned. Overwatch in position, Emily reported when they arrived. I have clear sight lines into the outer districts. I'm counting approximately 30 militia personnel visible from this position. The factory is on the eastern edge as described. I see movement around the perimeter. They're conducting a search pattern. Estimate 20 to 25 minutes before they reach the factory's immediate vicinity. Copy. We're moving. The approach worked as Emily had described it would. 3 times in the first 40 minutes. Her rifle fired quiet reports that reached Marcus's team as distant cracks, and each time a militia patrol that had been converging toward their position went down before it could identify them. The confusion rippled outward through the militia's communication, drawing attention away from the movement corridor the team was using. This is working, Walsh said quietly as they closed on the factory perimeter. Don't say that, Marcus replied. They entered the outer district of Al-Rashid, and immediately the calculation changed. Close quarters, narrow streets, buildings that provided cover but also blocked Emily's sight lines. She was working harder now, calling out patrol positions, estimating timing, guiding them through the street pattern toward the factory. You have a route, she said. There's a covered alley 30 meters east of your position. Follow it north for approximately 100 meters. There's a building with painted blue shutters. Go through it. Direct line to the factory from the far side. Marcus led the team through it without question. The alley was dark and narrow. The building with the blue shutters was empty. They emerged into a small open area with the factory visible 40 meters ahead and walked directly into a prepared ambush. The gunfire came from 3 directions simultaneously, coordinated and immediate. Marcus's team scattered, training overriding instinct, but there was almost no cover. Rodriguez went down with a sharp, involuntary shout, hit in the thigh, rolling into the partial shelter of a concrete block and immediately trying to pull himself behind it. Chen was beside him in seconds, hands already working. Overwatch, we're in contact, Marcus called into the radio as he laid down suppressing fire from behind a door frame. Southwest corner of the factory, taking fire from north, east, and south. Emily's voice came back immediately. I see you. Engaging. The rifle began firing with a rhythm that Marcus would later describe as metronomic, measured, precise, one target at a time. Not hurried, not panicked, simply working through the problem. 3 of the hostile firing positions went silent in succession. But there were too many and they were too close. The ambush had been positioned for exactly this, catching an extraction element in the open with no good cover, overwhelming their ability to respond. We can't hold here, Walsh called from 20 meters away. "We're getting cut apart." Emily's voice, urgent but controlled. "Actual, I'm tracking approximately 40 additional fighters moving toward your position from the north and east. 2 minutes until they reach engagement distance. You will not be able to hold against that number." 2 minutes. They were barely holding against what they already had. 40 more fighters would end this. "Overwatch, anything you can do to slow the reinforcements?" "Working on it." Then directed at Devlin, "I need you on targets. We're about to get very busy." For 90 seconds, Emily and Devlin worked in perfect, furious coordination. Emily's rifle did not stop. Devlin called targets and ranges and wind corrections, and Emily integrated them without pausing or hesitating. The reinforcement column slowed, then fragmented as its leading personnel went down and the survivors scrambled for cover. But it was not enough. Some were still pushing through. The militia fighters in the ambush were adapting, finding better cover, making the suppression harder. "Chen, status on Rodriguez?" Marcus called. "He's stable but losing blood. We need to move soon." Marcus looked at the factory door 30 meters away across open ground. Getting to it would cost them someone, but staying here was not survivable. "Overwatch, I need a route to the factory door now." Emily fired twice more. "Go now, door is clear, north side of the courtyard, move." Marcus was already moving. "Team on me, Walsh, take point. Rodriguez, Chen's got you, go." They ran. Emily's rifle provided cover throughout, 4 additional shots during the sprint, 4 additional threats going down. They crashed through the factory door and Walsh was already clearing corners. "Dr. Chen," Marcus called into the interior. "Dr. Sarah Chen, U.S. military, show yourself." A voice from above, a woman's voice, frightened but functional. "Second floor, northwest side." Walsh moved upstairs. Marcus held the ground floor with Devlin while Chen worked on Rodriguez. The factory was dark, smelling of old machine oil and concrete dust, full of shadows that could have hidden anything. They found the scientist crouched behind industrial equipment on the second floor, 3 days of fear evident on her face, but otherwise physically intact. Small, dark-haired, with the particular kind of steady composure that Marcus associated with people who were terrified but had decided not to show it. "Can you walk?" Walsh asked. "Yes." "Then stay close and do exactly what I tell you." Marcus's radio crackled. Emily's voice had changed. It was still controlled, but there was an edge to it now that had not been there before. "Actual, the militia has your position confirmed. I'm counting approximately 70 fighters converging on the factory from all sides. They're not going to wait. They're going to assault the building." 70 fighters, 6 active operators, 5 healthy, 1 down, 1 scientist, 1 doctor working on a wounded man. "Rescue element?" Hendricks came on the line. "Air support is 10 minutes out. Can you hold?" Marcus looked at the building. Defensible perimeter, multiple floors, but the ammunition situation was already degraded and they had 1 man down. "We'll hold." He looked at Chen. "Keep Rodriguez alive." Then into the radio, "Tell them to hurry." The assault began 3 minutes later. It was coordinated and heavy. The militia had numbers and commitment, and they used both. Marcus's team met them at the choke points, making every round count, using the factory's layout to force attackers into narrow approaches. The noise was absolute, weapons fire, collapsing debris, Walsh shouting target calls, Dr. Chen pressing herself into a corner and covering her ears. And through all of it, Emily's rifle, steady, constant. Each time a hostile element tried to position for a decisive move, climbing to a roof, flanking to a window, setting up a crew-served weapon, Emily's rifle reached out from the eastern ridge and removed the threat before it could materialize. "How many is that?" Walsh managed to ask during a brief lull. 14 from her position, Marcus said, plus whatever she's been doing to keep reinforcements off us. "She hasn't stopped." "I know, but they were running out of ammunition and time." Rodriguez was pale and still. Chen's hands were covered in blood. The militia was learning the factory's layout and adapting to the suppression. Then Emily spoke, and her voice had a quality Marcus had not heard in it before. "I have an option. It's extreme, but it may be the only thing that changes the outcome." "Talk to me." There is a technical vehicle parked on the south side of the factory. It has a large fuel container in the cargo bed. If I can put an incendiary round into that container, the resulting explosion would eliminate most of the concentration of fighters on the south side and create sufficient disruption to break their attack. A pause. "The range from my position to that vehicle is approximately 3,200 meters. Devlin was on the open channel immediately. Carter, that target is what, 30, 40 centimeters wide? At 3,200 meters. In combat conditions, that's not a shot, that's a wish. I made the 3,200-meter shot on the Graves operation. That target was a person-sized target. This is a fuel container strapped to a vehicle. I know what it is, sir. Quiet, certain. I believe I can make it. Marcus thought about Rodriguez on the floor upstairs. He thought about the ammunition count. He thought about 10 minutes of air support that was 1,000 years away. He thought about Devlin's face when he had confirmed Emily's first impossible shot, and the second and the third. "Everyone in this building gets flat and covers up," he said into the radio. "Carter, you have authorization to engage." He heard her breathing slow over the open channel. Heard Devlin begin calling the wind, careful, measured, the urgent precision of a man who understood exactly what was being attempted and was doing everything he could to make it possible. Emily's voice, barely audible. "Settling, adjusting for density gradient. Wind is going to steady in approximately 3 seconds. 3 seconds. The rifle fired. Marcus counted. 1, 2, 3. The southern wall of the factory shook. Heat and light and sound came through every gap and opening simultaneously. The concussive wave rolled through the interior and knocked dust from the ceiling and rattled every loose object in the building. When Marcus looked south, there was fire and silence where 70 fighters had been organizing an assault. "Target destroyed," Emily said. Her voice was shaking slightly. The first time Marcus had ever heard her voice shake. "South approach is clear. The attack has broken down." Walsh stood at a south-facing window looking at the wreckage and said nothing for a long moment. "She did it," he said finally. "She actually did it." The remaining militia fighters were withdrawing, the explosion having done exactly what Emily had predicted, disrupted their concentration, shattered their organization, replaced the momentum of attack with the survival instinct that made rational people move away from catastrophic fire. When the helicopter came screaming in 7 minutes later, guns clearing a path, Marcus was the last person out of the factory. He loaded Rodriguez first, then Dr. Chen, then his team one at a time. Emily and Devlin came in from the ridge as the aircraft was touching down. Emily looked the way Marcus felt, exhausted past the point where exhaustion was a meaningful description. Her face was gray under the dust and sweat. But she was standing, and she was carrying her rifle case, and she walked with the same measured gait she always walked with. He met her eyes as she climbed in. She looked at her hands. Marcus sat beside her for the flight back and did not say anything. Some things needed to settle before words could do them justice. The debrief was long and demanding and ultimately unsatisfying to the intelligence officer who kept returning to the impossibility of the fuel container shot, as though repetition might reveal an explanation that physics had not provided. "That shot is not achievable under those conditions," Carmichael said for the third time. "And yet it was achieved," Devlin replied for the third time. "I was spotting. I called the wind. She made the adjustment and she fired. The target detonated. That is the complete sequence of events." Carmichael turned to Emily. "How?" Emily looked tired in a way that was not merely physical. "Mathematics, sir. I ran the calculation, I trusted the inputs, and I fired. The rest is physics." "That is not sufficient explanation." "I understand, sir. It's the only explanation I have." Carmichael stood and went to the window. The desert outside was dark and still. "You understand what you are, what your capabilities represent?" He turned back to face the room. "Precision at this level, at these ranges, in these conditions, that changes the operational calculus entirely. You're not an asset. You're a strategic capability. You belong in a specialized environment where everything can be built around what you can do." "She belongs with this team," Marcus said immediately. "Sergeant Hale, she belongs with this team." Not loud, completely final. "She has operated with us through 3 major engagements in the past 2 weeks. We have built communication, trust, and operational understanding that took years to develop with every other member. You pull her out, put her in a specialized unit, and you start over from zero with people who have never seen what she can do and don't know how to work with her capabilities. You lose a significant portion of what makes her effective." Carmichael looked at Emily. "What do you want?" Emily met his eyes without hesitation. "I want to stay with this team, sir. They gave me an opportunity when no one else would. I'm not leaving." Carmichael was quiet for a moment. "This conversation isn't over, but for now, you stay, on the condition that I have access to the after-action documentation for every operation you're involved in." He left the room. The team sat in quiet for a long moment. Rodriguez's chair was empty. Rodriguez was in surgery. The best information they had was that he was going to be fine. "Good work tonight," Marcus said. "Everyone." He meant it for all of them. He looked at Emily when he said it. She was looking at her hands again. Marcus found her sitting alone in the equipment yard at midnight. The stars overhead were extraordinary. The desert sky at this distance from any city produced a density of light that had no urban equivalent. She was not cleaning her rifle. She was just sitting. "You okay?" Marcus asked, settling onto a crate near her. "No," she said it without apparent distress, just honesty. "That shot on the fuel container after I fired before it detonated, there was a moment where I thought I had missed. The wind shifted at the last second, not a lot, maybe 2 or 3 miles per hour, but it was enough. And I thought, that's it, I missed. Everyone in that building is going to die because I took a shot that was too difficult and I missed." "But you didn't miss." "I know, but those 4 seconds between the shot and the detonation, those 4 seconds are what I'm going to carry. The absolute certainty that I had killed everyone in that building with my own overconfidence." She looked at the stars. "How do you carry moments like that? Moments where you were wrong even if the outcome was right?" Marcus thought about that honestly. "You don't carry them. That's the honest answer. They carry you whether you want them to or not. They change the way you think and the way you calculate risk and the way you sleep. You don't get to put them down. You just get better at not being crushed by them." "I don't want to be like this forever," Emily said quietly. "I don't want to be someone whose hands shake and whose sleep is full of 4-second silences." She looked at him. "Is that a reasonable thing to hope for?" "It is, but it takes time and it takes deliberate work. It doesn't happen on its own." He paused. "I think you should talk to someone, a professional, not because something is wrong with you, because the opposite is true. Because what you experience in these operations, what you carry afterward, is real and it accumulates, and carrying it alone is not sustainable." Emily was quiet for a while. "My grandfather carried it alone. He didn't talk about Vietnam, not the operational specifics. He said some things were better kept in a box." "And what happened to him as he got older?" she considered. "He became quieter, more closed off. He had nightmares that my mother mentioned once. He was not entirely at peace in some ways, even at the end." She paused. "But he was a good man, he was kind and patient, and he loved deeply. He probably should have talked to someone too." Emily almost laughed. "He would have hated that suggestion." "Probably, but that doesn't mean it was wrong." Marcus stood. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." 4. Breaking point. The weeks that followed had the quality of time in which multiple truths are coexisting. The team ran operations. Emily continued to perform at the extraordinary level that had become her operational signature. And underneath all of it, the pressure continued to accumulate in the way that pressure does, quietly, invisibly, until the vessel holding it can no longer hold. It happened not in combat, but after. The mission had been a hostage situation involving children. 15 of them, ages 6 through 12, on a school bus that had been taken by a militia faction using them as leverage for demands that could not and would not be met. The rescue operation had been everything the planning suggested it would be: complex, high stakes, and dependent on Emily's ability to make precision engagements in an environment where a margin of error was something that could not be permitted to exist. She had performed perfectly. 7 hostile engagements at ranges between 1,400 and 1,800 meters, all confirmed hits, all targets eliminated without secondary casualties. The rescue team had reached the bus, secured the children, extracted under fire. Every child had come home. Emily had walked down from the ridge with Devlin at her side and found a spot at the edge of the extraction zone. And then, without warning or apparent transition, she was no longer holding herself together. She was crying in a way that Marcus had never seen from her, deep, racking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere beneath the professional exterior that had been her constant presentation. Devlin was beside her, his hand on her shoulder, talking quietly. When Marcus reached them, Emily was saying something about a shot she had made, the 3rd engagement, where a target had moved slightly at the moment of firing, and the round had passed within a hand's width of a child standing in the wrong place at the wrong moment. 6 inches, she kept saying. 6 inches. The children were safe, all 15 of them, alive and being triaged and returned to their parents. None of them had been harmed. Emily's shooting had been perfect by every measurable standard, but she was experiencing the failure that hadn't happened as if it were the failure that had. And Marcus understood immediately that this was something that had been coming for a long time. and had been deferred repeatedly by the sheer force of her discipline and sense of responsibility. The dam had broken, and what was flowing out was everything she had refused to acknowledge since the first day she had arrived on this base. Marcus sat on the ground beside her. Devlin moved back to give them space. "You kept every one of those children alive," Marcus said quietly. "This time," Emily said, and there was nothing performative in the breakdown. It was entirely real. "This time I kept them alive. What about next time? What about when my hand shakes, or the wind doesn't cooperate, or I'm 1 second slow? What about when I fail when it actually matters?" "That fear," Marcus said, "is something that every person in this work carries. It never goes away completely. The question is what you do with it." "What do I do with it? I've been carrying it since the first mission. I carry it every single time, and every time the stakes are higher and the shots are harder and more people need me to be perfect, and I am so tired of being perfect." She looked at him with swollen, exhausted eyes. "I can't keep doing this. I don't know how much more of this I have in me." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that surprised him as he said it. "Then don't. Not for a while. You've given more to this work in 6 weeks than most people give in years. You are allowed to stop and breathe. You are allowed to be a person instead of a weapon." Emily stared at him. "People will die if I'm not here. People existed in danger before you arrived, and they will continue to exist in danger whether or not you are here. You are not the only barrier between the world and catastrophe. You are one exceptional person among many exceptional people, and exceptional people break down and need rest, and that is not a failure. That is physiology." He looked at her steadily. "I am telling you right now, as your commanding officer, that you have earned a break. Not a short one, a real one, and I am going to make sure you take it." Dr. Patricia Morrison was a psychologist who specialized in special operations personnel. She had short gray hair and the kind of face that had seen most of what the human condition offered and had made peace with the inventory. She cleared her afternoon schedule the moment she saw Emily's expression. Carmichael tried to characterize the breakdown as a liability. Marcus characterized it as evidence of a human being who had been asked to carry too much for too long and had responded as human beings responded to excessive load. They argued about it with the particular tension of two people who agreed on the facts and disagreed on their meaning. In the end, the decision that mattered most was Emily's. "I need to take a break," she told Marcus after 2 hours with Dr. Morrison. "A real one. Morrison says at least a month. She says I'm in the early stages of burnout, and if I keep pushing without recovery, I'm going to reach a point where I can't come back." "I know," Marcus said. "That's why I'm ordering it. And if I don't want to go, then I'll make it a direct order and your options become following it or facing consequences. But I'd rather you made the choice yourself." Emily looked at her hands for a long time. If I take a month away, I might lose the edge. The precision, the pattern recognition, the ability to make those shots, I don't know if it comes back exactly the same after a full break. And if it doesn't, then someone who would have lived if I had been there dies instead." Marcus sat down beside her. "Emily, listen to me carefully. If you continue without rest, without recovery, you will eventually break in a way that cannot be repaired. And on the day that you break in the middle of an operation, with your team depending on you, the consequences of that broken moment will be exactly what you're trying to prevent. The responsible choice, the choice that serves the most people over the longest time, is to stop now before you break irreparably." She was silent for a long time. "Go home," Marcus said. "Wyoming. Your grandfather's grave. Your family. 30 days of being a person instead of a sniper. And then come back if you want to, if you choose to, not because you feel obligated to. Come back because it's what you want." The team assembled to say goodbye the morning she left. Rodriguez was on crutches, newly released from medical, and he stood beside Walsh and Chen and Devlin with the comfortable solidarity of people who have stopped needing words for what they feel about each other. "You saved my life in Al-Rashid," Rodriguez told her. "Just in case I haven't said that clearly enough." "You saved ours more times than I can count," Walsh added. Devlin, who had begun this relationship with contempt and had somewhere along the way become something like a protective older sibling, said nothing. He just pulled her into a brief, firm hug and stepped back. Marcus walked her to the transport. "I'll see you in a month," she said. "Take the time you need," he replied. "Not the time you think you're permitted, the time you need." The transport took her away into the morning sky, and Marcus stood on the tarmac watching it disappear and wondering whether what he had sent her toward was healing or an ending. 3 weeks into Emily's leave, a message arrived. Brief, direct, characteristically efficient. Asterisk visited my grandfather's grave. Told him about the missions, about the team, about Dr. Morrison. Believe he would have been proud. Also believe he would have told me to take better care of myself. Working on it. See you soon. Carter, asterisk Marcus read it twice and then showed it to the team. She's coming back, he said. How do you know? Rodriguez asked. Because she wrote see you soon, not maybe or if I decide to. She's already decided. Devlin was quiet for a moment. Good, he said finally. It's better when she's here. 5. The return and the impossible morning she came back at the end of the 4th week. Marcus was in the operations center when she walked in, and the change in her was immediately visible. Not dramatic. Emily was not a dramatic person, but real. The darkness was gone from her eyes. She was rested. Her face had the softness of someone who had been sleeping properly and eating regularly and allowing themselves to exist as a person rather than a function. She looked, Marcus thought, like an actual 19-year-old, for perhaps the first time since he had met her. Permission to rejoin the team, sir? Granted. Welcome back, Carter. He crossed the room and offered his hand. How was Wyoming? Cold, good. My grandfather's grave is in a small cemetery outside town with a view of the mountains that he would have chosen deliberately. She paused. I talked to him for about an hour, one-way conversation, but it helped. What did you tell him? Everything, all of it from the beginning. The first mission, graves, Al-Rashid, the children, the breakdown. She met Marcus's eyes. I told him I was struggling with the weight of the promise I made him, that I wasn't sure whether I was honoring the spirit of it or only the letter. What conclusion did you come to? That there is no version of use your gifts well that includes destroying yourself in the process. That he taught me to be precise and patient and to see what other people missed, and none of those qualities disappear when I put the rifle down and rest. They are mine. They are part of me. This work is one way to express them. It is not the only way, and it is not the entirety of what I am. She paused. He would have told me that knowing your limits is as important as knowing your capabilities. A sniper who doesn't know when to stop shooting wastes ammunition. Marcus smiled. He sounds like he gave you good instincts. He gave me everything. I'm just learning how to carry it properly. She looked around the room. What do I need to know? What did I miss? The first operation after Emily's return was deliberately modest. Marcus had worked with Hendricks to ensure it. A reconnaissance patrol, low risk, designed to ease her back into operational rhythm without immediately putting her in a position where everything depended on her being perfect. She performed with her usual quiet precision, made several shots in the mid-range, standard suppression work, came back to the base with clean kit and steady hands. That evening, Marcus found her cleaning her rifle, not from necessity, but from the meditative practice of it. How does it feel? He asked. Like coming home, she said simply, which tells me something I needed to know. What's that? That I belong here, not because I'm trapped here, not because the promise demands it, but because this is genuinely what I want. She looked at the rifle with clear, settled eyes. I thought the break might take the edge away and I'd discover I was okay with that. Instead, I spent a month thinking about nothing else and counting the days. She smiled slightly. That's my answer. Devlin brought her coffee without being asked, sat beside her, and they talked about technique for an hour, not the desperate knowledge transfer of someone trying to pass everything on before a catastrophe, but the easy exchange of people who had time and trusted each other. It was the most ordinary evening in Marcus's memory of this deployment. The call came at 0200. There were not many calls that came at that hour. None of them in Marcus's experience were ever good news. This one was no exception. He was in the operations center within 12 minutes. His team filtered in behind him. Emily came in last, hair in its practical braid, eyes already alert, already reading the room. The room contained Hendricks, Carmichael, 3 generals Marcus recognized by rank and not by name, and the particular quality of controlled alarm that filled spaces where catastrophic things were being responded to. We have a confirmed intelligence intercept, Carmichael began. 72 hours ago, a coordinated attack against forward operating Base Liberty was planned and set in motion. The attack was designed to breach the perimeter using multiple armored vehicles carrying substantial explosive payloads, timed and targeted to maximize casualties within the base population of approximately 3,000 personnel. The room was completely silent. Walsh said what everyone was calculating. 3,000 people. The vehicles are currently tracking toward the base along 3 separate approach routes. They are converging on a geographic choke point approximately 12 kilometers from the base, a canyon system where all 3 routes merge into a single corridor. Our window to interdict them at that choke point is approximately 3 hours from now. Air assets, Marcus asked, on standby but not suitable as primary interdiction. The canyon creates angle problems, and the risk of fragmentation affecting the base perimeter is too high at that distance. We need precision interdiction from elevated ground positions. Every eye in the room went to Emily. She was looking at the map with the focused concentration of someone building a 3-dimensional model in their mind. Her eyes traced the canyon system, the ridge positions, the approach angles. She was not waiting to be asked. She was already working the problem. How many vehicles? She asked without looking up. 6 confirmed, each carrying approximately 200 kilograms of explosive material. They are moving in coordinated timing designed to arrive simultaneously. Speed, approximately 60 kilometers per hour through the canyon system. Emily looked up from the map. Her face was the same settled, composed stillness it had always been when she was in her deepest concentration. Moving targets at that speed at ranges between 2,000 and 2,500 meters, she said. I'll have approximately 3 to 4 seconds per vehicle in the engagement window. Lead calculation at that speed and that range is significant. She paused. I can do this. Carter, Devlin said carefully. Moving vehicle engagements at those ranges are different from stationary targets. Yes, sir. I know. I've been practicing lead calculations since I was 15. She looked at Marcus. I need Devlin on the spotter scope. I need the best available position on the canyon's north ridge, and I need to be there in the next 90 minutes. Marcus looked at her and thought about the month of rest, about the conversation at her grandfather's grave, about the version of Emily Carter that had walked back into his operations center looking rested and settled and whole. You understand what this is, he said. Yes, sir. This is 6 shots at moving armored vehicles at ranges that haven't been attempted in combat conditions. If you miss one, it continues toward the base. I understand. And you're sure? She met his eyes, not with the brittle certainty of someone performing confidence they do not feel, but with the grounded, specific knowledge of a person who has spent years building a single skill to its absolute limit. I'm sure, sir. Marcus turned to Hendricks. We need transport immediately. What's the situation on the North Ridge access? The canyon was cold and dark, and the stars overhead were brilliant. Marcus and his team deployed across 3 positions, Emily and Devlin on the North Ridge with the best sight lines into the choke zone, Walsh and Rodriguez as mobile response if any vehicle got through the engagement window, Chen as both medic and radio relay. Emily set up with the systematic thoroughness that was her standard. Every component of the rifle verified. Every wind indicator she had placed downrange checked and rechecked. The first vehicle was 17 minutes out. I want to go through this before the first vehicle arrives, she told Devlin. Talk me through your wind reading protocol for this corridor. Devlin, who had been skeptical of this 19-year-old less than 2 months ago and was now watching her with an expression that Marcus characterized as something approaching reverence, began talking. They worked through the specific environmental conditions of the canyon, the way the terrain channeled and modified the surface wind, the temperature differential between the canyon floor and the ridge, the way heat rising from the desert affected point of impact at these ranges. It was a technical conversation happening 9 minutes before Emily attempted one of the most difficult shooting tasks in the operational history of her service branch. She listened with complete attention. She asked 2 precise, specific questions. She integrated the answers into whatever internal model she was building. Then she went still. First vehicle is in range, Devlin said quietly. Range 2,400 meters. Speed approximately 60 kilometers per hour, slightly variable as they navigate the canyon bends. Wind is 6 miles per hour from the northeast, stable. Emily's eye went to the scope. Acquiring. Marcus was watching through a spotting scope from 30 meters away. The vehicle was a large, heavily built truck moving through the canyon with the purposeful urgency of something aimed at a specific target. He could barely track it at this range. The idea that anyone could put a round through its engine block from here at this speed seemed fundamentally impossible. Calculating lead, Emily said, silence. Firing. The rifle cracked. 2 seconds later, the truck's hood erupted in a spray of metal and steam. The vehicle veered hard left, struck the canyon wall with a reverberating impact that Marcus felt in his chest from a kilometer away and stopped. Devlin said nothing for a moment. Then, confirmed hit. Engine compartment. Vehicle is stopped. Second vehicle, Emily said, already cycling the bolt. The second vehicle had seen the first one die. It was moving erratically, accelerating, braking, swerving across the full width of the canyon in a pattern designed to make precise targeting impossible. Marcus watched Emily track it. She did not hurry. She did not rush the shot. She watched the pattern, and Marcus could see the calculation in the stillness of her, the reading of rhythm, the prediction of where the erratic movement was going next. "It's overcorrecting," Emily said quietly, more to herself than to Devlin. "Watch the steering. Every swerve right is followed by 2 swerves left. The driver keeps coming back to the same reflex." She waited. The truck swerved right. She fired. The truck swerved left directly into the path of the round. The windshield dissolved. The truck veered off the road and rolled twice before coming to rest against the canyon wall. "Hit," Devlin said. "Driver is down." Third and fourth vehicles are entering the window simultaneously. Devlin continued. They are in trail formation, using each other for partial cover. "I'll take the lead vehicle first and transition to the second immediately. I need your count on time to clear the window." Lead vehicle is at approximately 2,100 meters. Trailing vehicle is 200 meters behind. At their speed, you have roughly 5 seconds between shots if you make the first one cleanly. 5 seconds, Emily said. "Okay." She fired. The lead truck's hood erupted. She cycled the bolt in a single smooth motion that took less than a second and acquired the second truck, still moving, slightly angled away, the driver having seen the first truck die and beginning a reaction that had not yet materialized into evasion. She fired. The second truck's windshield shattered and it drifted, driverless, into the canyon wall. 4 vehicles down, Devlin said. 2 remaining, Emily said. Where are they? The final 2 vehicles were the moment where the calculus changed. They had apparently been in communication with the first 4 because they adjusted. They separated, using the terrain of the canyon to create a situation where a single shooting position could not cover both of them simultaneously. One stayed on the primary route. The other took a secondary path that would cut around the south wall of the canyon and approach the base by a different angle. "I can hold the north path," Emily said. "The south path vehicle is going to exit my sight line in approximately 90 seconds. Marcus was already moving. Walsh, Rodriguez, we intercept the south vehicle at the canyon exit. Move." "With what?" Rodriguez demanded. He was still recovering, still moving at less than full capacity. "Chen, you have demolition charges?" "Standard kit, yes. We are going to create an obstacle. Move." "Emily, you have the north vehicle. We'll handle the south." Walsh and Rodriguez and Chen were already running. Marcus followed, calculating distances and terrain. The South Canyon exit was approximately 2 kilometers away. The vehicle was moving at 60 kilometers per hour. They had something like 2 minutes. As Marcus ran, he heard Emily's rifle fire once behind him. He did not look back to check the result. He did not need to. They reached the canyon exit with perhaps 40 seconds to spare. Chen already had the demolition charges out. "There," Walsh said, pointing to a narrow section where the canyon walls pressed close. "Rock face above the road. If we can bring it down, small charges precisely placed," Chen said. He was already moving. His hands were expert and completely steady. "The rock here is fractured. It won't take much." Rodriguez covered the approaches. Marcus watched the south end of the canyon for the vehicle's lights. There they were, moving fast, less than a minute away. "Go," Marcus told Chen. Chen had the charges placed and wired in under 30 seconds. He moved back to a safe distance, trailing the detonation cable. The truck's engine sound was becoming distinct. It was moving fast, committed to the run, the driver perhaps unaware that the north route vehicle had been stopped. "Now," Marcus said. Chen triggered the charges. The canyon wall came down in a rolling collapse that was louder than the gunfire had been, a deep, grinding, crumbling impact that shook the earth under Marcus's feet and filled the air with dust and rock debris. Tons of stone blocked the road from wall to wall. The truck came around the final bend and hit the rockfall at full speed. The impact was catastrophic and immediate. Marcus had time to take a single step back before the shockwave hit him, the secondary detonation of the vehicle's explosive cargo expanding outward in a sphere of heat and force that knocked him off his feet and drove him into the canyon wall. When he got up, his ears were ringing and his vision was swimming at the edges. He looked at what was left of the truck and processed it as an absence of threat. "Everyone standing," he said. "Standing," Walsh said from several meters away, sounding like his ears were also damaged. Standing, Rodriguez said. Bleeding from the head, but I was bleeding before. Standing, Chen confirmed. Are we done? Marcus keyed his radio. Overwatch, we have the south vehicle down. Status on the north vehicle? Emily's voice. North vehicle was stopped approximately 3 minutes ago. All 6 vehicles are confirmed inoperative. The base is safe, sir. Marcus sat down on a rock and breathed. 6 shots at moving vehicles in a narrow canyon at ranges between 2,000 and 2,400 meters. 5 confirmed engine kills. 1 rapid double engagement with a 4-second window between shots. All in pre-dawn darkness with variable wind. And then, when the 6th vehicle had escaped her sight line, she had called it clearly and accurately and let the team handle it, which was itself a kind of discipline. Outstanding work, Overwatch, Marcus said finally, a long pause. Thank you, sir, Emily said. Her voice was steady. She was, as always, composed. Requesting permission to remain in position until your team has fully extracted. I want to confirm there are no secondary threats in the corridor. Granted, and Carter, well done, doesn't begin to cover it. The debriefing went for 6 hours. 3,000 people who would spend their day on forward operating base Liberty without knowing how close they had come to not spending it anywhere. Generals who had never met Emily Carter and could not quite believe the documentation they were being shown. Intelligence analysts who wanted detailed technical breakdowns of engagements that they would be studying for years. Emily answered every question with patience and precision. She explained the lead calculations, the wind analysis, the judgment calls she had made in the 4 to 5 second windows between vehicles. She was thorough and clear and completely without arrogance. When the formal debrief ended, Hendricks kept her back. Carter, Hendricks said, and her tone had something in it that Marcus had not heard from her before, something almost careful. I've been considering very seriously how to characterize what you've done in the 6 weeks you've been with this unit. And I've concluded that I don't have the right language for it. The marksmanship is extraordinary, but the pattern recognition, the ability to read an environment and understand what it's telling you before anyone else can perceive it, that is the actual capability. The rifle is just the mechanism. Emily said nothing. I want you to know that I fought Carmichael's request to transfer you to a specialized program. I believe your capabilities are best used in the context of an established team with the operational trust and communication that context provides. And I believe Marcus Hale's team is the right environment for you. Hendricks paused. I also want to say something I don't say enough. Thank you for what you've done, for what you've given. Emily looked at her for a moment. Thank you for the chance, ma'am. I know how I arrived here, what everyone thought I was before they'd seen me work. Getting the opportunity to demonstrate what I could actually do, that mattered. You more than demonstrated it. I had good help. That evening, as the sun completed another of its extravagant desert exits, Marcus sat with Emily on the ridge east of the base. Not a tactical position, just a place with a long view. I want to ask you something, Marcus said. And I want an honest answer, not the answer you think I want to hear. All right. When you decided to come back when you were in Wyoming at your grandfather's grave, and you made the decision to return, were you coming back because you genuinely wanted to? Or were you coming back because you felt that the promise required it? Emily thought about this for a long time. The stars were appearing overhead, 1 and 2 and then dozens. Both, she said finally. And that's actually the answer I needed to find. Because if it had been only obligation, that would have been unsustainable. And if it had been only personal desire without any connection to something larger than myself, that would have been insufficient. The place where both things are true simultaneously, where the work is what I want and also what I believe is right, that's the place I needed to find. And you found it. I found it in Wyoming, at a small grave marker in a mountain cemetery, talking to a man who is not there anymore. She paused. My grandfather spent 40 years teaching me skills he had learned in a war that cost him things he never fully talked about. He spent those 40 years not for his own benefit, but because he believed the skills were too important to let die with him. He found meaning in the transmission of what he knew, not just in the knowledge itself. She looked at the stars. I find meaning in the same place, not just in the shooting, in the teaching, in the contribution, in the fact that when Devlin now reads a wind pattern differently because I've shown him what I see, that my grandfather's understanding has extended further into the world. Marcus was quiet for a while. When did you become this wise? Emily almost laughed. I'm not wise, sir. I'm a 19-year-old who has been through a very dense 6 weeks and has had good people around her to help her process it. She paused. You particularly. What you brought to this team, Marcus said carefully, goes beyond the tactical contributions. You changed how we see each other. You reminded us that competence comes in shapes we don't always expect. You reminded Devlin that there are always new things to learn. You reminded me that trust is a decision before it is an experience. He paused. We're better operators than we were before you arrived, not because you can shoot at distances most people consider impossible, because you showed us what it looks like to be fully committed to a craft. Emily was quiet for a long moment. My grandfather would have liked you, she said. He valued people who said true things clearly. They sat in the gathering dark and let the desert be what it was, enormous, ancient, indifferent, and somehow, in the way of all large things honestly confronted, comforting. Below them, the base settled into its nighttime rhythms. 3,000 people who would sleep without knowing how close the morning had been. On a ridge that her grandfather had never seen, in a desert he had never visited, Emily Carter kept watch the way he had taught her, not out of fear, but out of the deep, clear-eyed understanding of someone who knows what is worth protecting and why. The wind moved through the scrub below them, telling its quiet stories to anyone who knew how to listen. Emily listened. She always had. Epilogue, what remains 1 year. It had been 1 year since a slight figure in an oversized flight suit had stepped off a helicopter on a sun-blasted tarmac and walked toward an operations building with her head down, and her rifle case gripped in both hands while an entire forward operating base stared at her and decided without evidence that she was a liability. Marcus thought about that moment sometimes. The particular speed of human judgment. The way a lifetime of experience had looked at Emily Carter and decided, in the first 30 seconds, that it understood everything it needed to know about her. Experience had been wrong. He sat with her on the ridge east of the base on the evening of the anniversary and thought about the distance between the beginning and now. Rodriguez had fully recovered and was running ops at full capacity. Devlin had incorporated Emily's wind-reading methodology into his own practice and had made 2 shots in the past month that he would not have attempted before she arrived. Walsh had started teaching her close quarters techniques because he believed in the exchange of knowledge as the fundamental logic of teams. Chen had become someone Emily went to when the weight of the work pressed too hard, because he had a particular quality of steady attention that helped. They were a better team, better than before. Better because of her, but also better in ways that had nothing to do with her specifically, ways that came from being pushed to grow by someone who did not accept the limitations that experience sometimes mistakes for reality. What do you want for the next year? Marcus asked. Emily thought about the question with the genuine consideration she gave everything. The stars were extraordinary overhead. The desert was cooling into its nighttime stillness. To keep learning, she said. There are always refinements. There are always environmental conditions I haven't encountered before, trajectories I haven't calculated, wind patterns I haven't seen. There's no ceiling on understanding. That's a professional answer. All right. She was quiet for a moment. I want to see my family again. I want to sit at my grandfather's workbench and smell the machine oil and feel the particular silence of a space where a very good person did very careful work. She paused. I want to have a dinner that isn't a field ration. I want to sleep for 12 hours and wake up with nothing particular to do. Those sound achievable. They sound wonderful. Marcus smiled. For what it's worth, and I recognize that my assessment of you has evolved considerably since the day you arrived, I think you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, in the best way I've seen it done. Emily looked at the horizon. My grandfather said once that the purpose of a skill is not the skill itself. The skill is just the mechanism. The purpose is the life you protect, the harm you prevent, the space you create for things to continue that deserve to continue. She paused. I understand that now in a way I didn't when he said it. I understand it because I've seen it. I've seen the people who went home because someone was careful and precise and paying full attention. I've seen what continues because of that. She turned to look at him. That's what I'm honoring, sir. Not a promise, not an obligation, not a debt, a purpose. My grandfather's purpose and now mine. Marcus nodded. Below them, lights burned in the base. People moved through routines of work and rest and ordinary living. Birds moved through the early dark on routes that did not account for human concerns. The desert stretched in all directions, vast, patient, full of stories for anyone who learned to read them. Emily Carter had been 19 years old when she arrived with a rifle and a promise, and a way of seeing that was unlike anything Marcus had encountered in 22 years. She was still 19, technically. The anniversary was not that kind. But she was also older in the ways that mattered, seasoned by experience, strengthened by difficulty, balanced by the deliberate work of understanding her own limits and learning to tend to them. She was exceptional. Marcus had known that since the first shot on the range. But what had made her a genuinely remarkable person was not the exceptional talent. It was what she had done with the weight of it, how she had carried it, how she had refused to let it become the entirety of her, how she had found the strength to ask for help and to accept it when it came. That was the real gift her grandfather had given her. Not just the skill of reading wind or calculating distance or building a rifle to match grade specification, but the understanding that gifts are not burdens to be borne alone, and that purpose does not require isolation. The wind came up from the south, warm and carrying sand, the way desert wind does in its undemanding way. Emily lifted her face slightly into it. She was listening. She was always listening.